Imagine the edge of Long Island at dawn, where the Atlantic crashes against Montauk Point. A cold wind whips across the shore, carrying the cries of distant gulls. Rising from the dunes, a massive concrete radome stands silhouetted against the pale sky, its curved form battered by years of salt and storm. And then, cutting through the gusts, a faint tape hiss emerges, the crackle of an old analog cassette. A trembling voice breaks in, "We opened a portal."
Welcome to Unexplained History, where we explore the stories that linger in the shadows of the past. If you're enjoying the show, hit subscribe for more episodes like this one, and check out our audiobook series for deeper dives into these mysteries. Today, we're beginning a journey into a place where official records meet extraordinary tales, a site that invites us to question what we think we know.
That wind-blasted radome marks the heart of Camp Hero, a former U.S. Army and Air Force coastal defense and radar installation on Montauk Point. Much of the site is now Camp Hero State Park, open to hikers and visitors who wander its trails, unaware of the layers beneath. But in another telling, this same structure looms as something far more enigmatic, a focal point for accounts of time travel portals and teleportation created at Camp Hero. These claims circulate through books, forums, and whispered conversations, painting the location as a hub of hidden experiments. The year 1992 serves as a key anchor in this narrative, when Preston B. Nichols published The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time. Through that book, Preston became the primary originator of the modern Montauk narrative, drawing national attention to Camp Hero as the focal point of these extraordinary claims. His work influenced other claimants and media treatments, widening the story's reach across audiences hungry for the unexplained. Preston spoke with an authoritative tone, insistent on the details he presented, often framing them with a performative curiosity that invited listeners to join his quest for truth. This shift marked a profound change in his life. He sustained public speaking and publication as a primary activity, positioning himself as a mediator between personal experience and a broader audience. In doing so, he bridged the gap between private memory and public fascination. Here at Unexplained History, we approach these dual frames with care, one grounded in public records and local history, the other drawn from dramatic witness accounts that spread like a cultural contagion. We promise to treat testimony empathetically, honoring the voices while anchoring our investigation in verifiable facts. The tension lives in that space between, where an ordinary retired military site coexists with tales of the impossible. If we accept all claims uncritically, we risk amplifying harm. If we dismiss them reflexively, we risk ignoring real histories of abuse. As the dawn night strengthens over the radome, two stories begin to unfold side by side, each shaping how we see this windswept corner of the world.
I've always found places like this fascinating, how they can hold so many layers of meaning. Now, as we dig deeper, we'll explore the documented history to set the stage. How do we hold together a place that is both an ordinary retired military site and, in some accounts, the locus of extraordinary experiments? Today, we're diving into the story of Camp Hero and the real Cold War machinery that defined it. Let's uncover the documented history of the Montauk Air Force Station. We'll hear from those who knew it best.
Imagine the clack of typewriter keys filling a dimly lit office, an aerial photo spread out on a desk, with handwritten notes scribbled in the margins, and the sharp thud of a deed transfer stamp sealing official papers. These are the sounds and sights of bureaucracy in motion at Montauk Air Force Station, a radar and defense installation that stood watch during the height of the Cold War. Operational from roughly 1951 to 1981, it played a key role in monitoring potential threats from the skies. Official records paint a picture of daily routines, personnel checking stamped crate labels, filing typewritten memos, and maintaining equipment behind barred windows. Peeling paint on service doors hints at years of exposure to the salty Atlantic air. In the 1980s and 1990s, parts of the site were transferred to state and local authorities, transforming a once military outpost into public parkland. This shift brought new stewards to the forefront. Meet the Camp Hero Park Ranger, archival reference, who became a steward of the site as it transitioned into public parkland. Responsible and protective of local history, the ranger often felt tired from repetitive inquiries about the place. The ranger fielded questions from visitors drawn by the site's strange reputation, working with local archives to preserve historical material related to the base. Over time, this led to spending more time on community outreach than routine conservation. Balancing interpretive programming with managing tourism curiosity became a daily task as the ranger navigated the blend of factual records and public interest. Grainy 1970s congressional footage shows discussions on defense budgets, while blueprints filed in local repositories detail the station's construction. Yet some claim the government covered up all evidence of Montauk experiments, circulating online as part of broader suspicions. If the public record can be read clearly, we have a firm baseline to judge extraordinary claims. The social life of Montauk after closure reveals how place and memory intertwine, with park visitors exploring the remnants today.
That gives us a solid look at the base's operational history and its transition. What does the paper trail of a Cold War installation actually show, and where does documented secrecy end and speculation begin? As we delve deeper into the shadows of Camp Hero, the story widens to encompass a broader era of secrecy and revelation. Today, we examine MKUltra and the revelations that shook public trust, grounding ourselves in what was documented amid the rising myths.
Imagine the solemn tones of a congressional hearing room in the 1970s, voices clipped and grave, set against a faint electronic hum that seems to linger in the air like an unspoken secret. This was the setting for the Church Committee investigations, where the veil lifted on Project MKUltra, a documented CIA program that ran from 1953 to 1973. It funded research into behavior control involving LSD experiments, hypnosis, and techniques known as psychic driving. Grainy footage from those hearings shows senators poring over typewritten memos, the faint hiss of analog tapes crackling in the background, revealing how the agency pursued methods to influence the human mind. Many of these efforts targeted unwitting subjects, leading to exposures that highlighted profound institutional failures. The program's funding supported experiments that often crossed ethical lines, with records later showing bureaucratic choices to destroy parts of the evidence. Yet enough survived to paint a picture of real harm inflicted in the name of national security. Amid these revelations, stories emerged that blurred lines further. Some claim a device called the Montauk chair was used to amplify psychic abilities and manipulate consciousness, though such assertions remain unverified extensions of the known facts. Understanding MKUltra's reality is essential, so we do not conflate documented harm with unverified claims. This distinction matters, especially when considering those who endured the program's effects. Consider the anonymous MKUltra survivor, a composite figure drawn from public records, who suffered medical and psychological harm from experiments later publicly acknowledged. Feeling deeply betrayed and haunted by the experience, the survivor became resolutely demanding of accountability from those in power. Their testimony contributed to the political pressure that fueled the congressional investigations, shifting public perception toward greater oversight of intelligence activities. In response, the survivor engaged with advocacy groups for victims of unethical research, emerging as a cautionary voice in discussions about government experimentation.
These documented events not only exposed abuses, but also planted seeds for broader skepticism and law. How do documented abuses by intelligence agencies change the public's threshold for accepting extraordinary personal testimony? We've seen how government programs like MKUltra left real scars, fueling suspicions that echo into wilder tales. Now, let's trace how a local rumor grew into something much larger through books, films, and online communities. This is From Books to Film: How a Local Rumor Became a Narrative Machine.
Imagine flipping through a faded book cover, the title bold against a grainy backdrop, then a VHS tape whirring to life with hazy footage, and finally, forum threads scrolling by with pings of new replies lighting up the screen. That's the spark of a story taking hold. By the 1990s, whispers from Montauk had evolved, finding form in print and on screen, drawing in those curious about hidden histories. It started with Preston B. Nichols and his 1992 book, The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, which laid out a framework that turned fragmented rumors into a cohesive tale. Nichols, along with collaborators, became the key figures shaping this modern narrative. The book didn't just recount events, it structured them like a bestseller, making the ideas easy to share and discuss among enthusiasts. Preston's approach was entrepreneurial, infused with a performative conviction that drew people in, as he positioned himself as the self-authoring voice of these accounts. This energy propelled the story forward. From there, the narrative spread through speaking tours and interviews, building a small industry around the claims, with Preston relying on these media spots to keep the momentum alive. His shift toward becoming a public mythmaker and chronicler reshaped his own path, tying his identity to the tale's endurance. Some claims circulating tied back to older stories, suggesting the Philadelphia experiment had opened a space-time rift that experiments at Montauk later tried to manage. These ideas gained traction as the book inspired films and documentaries. By 2014 and 2015, the Montauk Chronicles documentary brought claimant accounts to life, amplifying them through film festivals and online hubs, where early 2000s forum threads with their pixelated screenshots and citizen journalism vibe kept discussions buzzing. This progression from tape cassettes to VHS grain and into digital forums showed how publishing and media artifacts could turn curiosity into a widespread phenomenon. When a story spreads without verification, it changes lives and can outpace the truth.
It's fascinating how these elements combined to build a narrative that resonated so widely. But who were the people at the center of this amplification? What exactly happens when a single vivid account finds an audience hungry for a complete and sensational narrative? In this segment, we turn our attention to the people at the heart of the Montauk stories. We'll listen to their words, examine how they build their accounts, and consider the human elements that make these tales so compelling.
Claimant 1. It started in the late 70s at Camp Hero, an impossible experiment with time portals. Claimant 2. Teleportation right there in Montauk, around 1983, pulling us through dimensions. Claimant 3. The same setup, those dates, experiments bending reality itself. These voices echo similar motifs, drawing listeners into a shared narrative of secret projects at an old military base. We begin with Al Bielek, whose recollections often carry an evocative tone, delivered with conviction that draws people in. Al introduced elements from the Philadelphia experiment into the Montauk stories, creating a lineage that others would follow. His theatrical personal narrative became a template, repeated in interviews and appearances. Some claim time travel portals and teleportation were created at Camp Hero. In breathy, close mic recordings, Al describes vivid scenes, his dramatic recollection painting pictures of hidden tech and altered states. He adopted a public role as a witness and storyteller, using those platforms to keep his accounts in circulation. This shift allowed him to connect with audiences, sustaining the relevance of his experiences through repeated tellings. A key disputed element is the Montauk chair, said to amplify psychic abilities and manipulate consciousness. Imagine it as a single wooden chair in a concrete room, a stark symbol in these accounts. Individual narratives like these shape public perception, and unpacking their motives and methods helps us weigh the claims thoughtfully. Al became a frequent source for documentaries, his words echoing in audio excerpts from claimant interviews. The Montauk Chronicles documentary in the mid-2010s amplified Nichols, Bielek, and Swerdlow's accounts, expanding public exposure during 2014 to 2015. Through such exposure, their rhetorical choices, building credibility with detailed timelines and emotional delivery, invite listeners to engage deeply.
These accounts, with their consistent motifs and passionate delivery, raise intriguing questions about storytelling and belief. What do these claimants gain by telling such vivid stories, and how does audience response shape their subsequent narratives? After hearing those intense personal accounts, it's time to shift our focus to the records, or the lack of them. In this segment, Paper Trails and Missing Receipts, we examine the forensic archival work that tries to verify claims about Camp Hero.
Imagine a quiet room, the rhythm of slow keyboard clicks filling the air. A researcher carefully opens a thick envelope from a Freedom of Information Act request, flipping through pages until the final line, "No responsive records." It's a moment that echoes through investigations like this one. Archival methods start simple, submitting FOIA requests to government agencies for any documents related to specific sites or projects. These are formal asks for declassified files, procurement records, or military logs that might mention unusual activities. Public record searches follow, combing through libraries, databases, and online archives for engineering manifests or personnel rosters. Corroboration would appear as matching details, like a logged purchase of specialized equipment or a roster noting staff involved in secret tests. For claims about Camp Hero, searches through FOIA and public records have returned no procurement or engineering manifests for exotic devices. No declassified government documents, procurement records, or contemporaneous military logs have been produced that corroborate claims of time travel, teleportation, alien artifacts, or a Montauk chair at Camp Hero. Typewritten memos stack up beside a blank spreadsheet, each empty cell highlighting what's not there. Outside, salt spray clings to rusted fences and chain-link gates, a reminder of the site's weathered isolation. Stuart Swerdlow became a recurring documentary voice, describing psychic experimentation, his earnest and spiritualized accounts attracting a devoted following who treated them as evidence. When challenged, he grows defensive, holding firm to his version of events. His testimony drove interest in these corroborative archival searches, yet some claim the government covered up all evidence of Montauk experiments. Still, careful archival work remains the only route to credible corroboration. Without it, extraordinary claims lack necessary grounding. Each negative result from a file request builds a picture of insufficient documentation, but absence alone doesn't overrule possibilities. It simply leaves claims unprovable through records, turning attention to the gaps where doubt persists.
The archives offer a meticulous but incomplete view, showing us what's documented and what's not. What does it mean when archival absence meets detailed testimony? Does absence equal disproof, or does it leave room for doubt? In the quiet corners of Montauk, stories don't just fade away, they evolve, shared among those who find meaning in them. This is Community, Consolation, and the Mechanics of Belief, where we explore how local legends take root and thrive.
Faded forum threads flicker on old screens. I was there in '95, saw the radar tower glow. Another post echoes, "My uncle worked the base. Whispers of experiments." A tourism brochure hums invitingly. "Visit Camp Hero, where history meets mystery." And from a distant convention hall, a low chant rises. "We remember, we remember." Since the 1990s, after the base closed, local folklore has blossomed, drawing visitors to Montauk's shores. Online discussions from the early 2000s capture this shift, with pixelated screenshots preserving tales of hidden wonders. Some claim time travel portals and teleportation emerged at Camp Hero, stories that circulate in these digital spaces, binding people through shared intrigue. Local Montauk institutions document community memory, photographs, and local press coverage showing how folklore around Camp Hero grew after base closure. These archives reveal a web of personal accounts, turning individual whispers into a collective voice. Children's drawings, scribbled in schoolrooms, echo motifs from popular shows, portals sketched in crayon, figures vanishing into light. Such imagery reflects how younger generations absorb and reshape these narratives. At the heart of this preservation stands the Montauk Library archivist, whose work catalogues local press and ephemera tracing the legend's growth. Curious about the tales, yet protective of community memory, the archivist fields researcher requests and visitor inquiries sparked by the narrative's popularization. Bewildered by national attention, the archivist has increased efforts to create context sheets for visitors, balancing preservation work with managing sensational inquiries. This role highlights the solace found in shared stories, even as they shield claims from deeper scrutiny. In these communities, overlapping forum posts and convention gatherings foster a sense of belonging, where fragmented memories weave into enduring bonds. Belief communities can offer solace but also shield unverified claims from scrutiny, affecting public understanding.
These gatherings and archives show how stories persist, providing comfort and connection amid uncertainty. Why do communities hold on to stories that lack external verification? And what social functions do those stories serve? We've heard the stories from Montauk, those vivid accounts of secret experiments and hidden technologies. Now, it's time to bring in the science of memory and a close look at the evidence trail.
An expert's voice cuts through the static. Memory is constructive. Then, a crackling tape plays a claimant's words from years ago, reciting a scene of shadowy tests at Montauk, the details sharp and unchanged in later retellings. In the glow of sodium vapor streetlights casting an orange haze over forgotten archives, we turn to the independent memory scientist for insight. This field reveals how our recollections build themselves, layer by layer, influenced by time and retelling. Research shows that vivid memories can feel utterly real, yet they often blend facts with influences from suggestion or repeated narration. For the Montauk testimonies, this means confident accounts of experiments might harden over time into something that feels like undeniable truth. The scientist explains it plainly. Studies on suggestibility demonstrate how external cues can shape what we recall, without any intent to deceive. Applying this to claims of time manipulation or psychic devices at the site, we see how group discussions could amplify certain elements. Yet the approach remains compassionate toward witnesses, recognizing the emotional weight of their experiences. Scientific methods help protect both truth and the dignity of those who report traumatic memories, ensuring we clarify limits without dismissing personal stories. Shifting to the evidence audit, declassified CIA files and FOIA-released memoranda provide additional documentation of MKUltra sub-projects, memos, and program structures. These records clarify the broader scope, but fall short on site-specific exotic devices mentioned in Montauk law. Archival notes confirm declassified MKUltra memos exist and outline the program's reach. Yet they do not validate claims of advanced tech at that location. Some claim the government covered up all evidence of Montauk experiments, circulating these ideas online amid the 1980s VHS grain of old footage. The scientist, resolute about methodology, has provided empirical frameworks that explain why vivid recollections can diverge from documented events. This clinical yet compassionate stance has guided journalists on ethical interviewing, and now the scientist consults on media projects to advise best practices, while publishing accessible pieces that translate memory research for everyone.
With these tools from cognitive science and the archival record, we can approach the testimonies more carefully. It leads us to consider the bigger picture of cultural impact and ethical storytelling. Given what we know about memory and about the archival record, how should we weigh confident testimony that lacks independent corroboration? We've been tracing the threads of Montauk's shadowy lore, from Cold War experiments to fringe narratives that linger in the public imagination. Now, let's explore how these stories found new life in popular culture, reshaping how we think about hidden histories.
Imagine a creator's voice cutting through static. We called it Montauk, layered over flickering images, archival photos of Long Island shores blending with neon-lit bikes, under sodium vapor streetlights, and the grainy haze of 1980s VHS tapes. This is the cultural echo of Montauk, reborn in the hit series Stranger Things. In 2015 and 2016, the Duffer Brothers dove into research on Montauk and MKUltra lore, drawing from these elements as one of several inspirations for their show. Early drafts even carried Montauk as the working title, before the setting shifted to the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana. The brothers have openly cited this background, emphasizing how it fueled their inventive vision, blending nostalgia for 1980s aesthetics with tales of government secrets and psychic phenomena. Yet this adaptation walks a careful line, transforming disputed claims, like some assertions that the Philadelphia experiment opened a space-time rift, later explored at Montauk, into fictional motifs without endorsing them as fact. The show's creators foreground their broader inspirations, from classic films to real historical events. Through this process, the Duffer shifted their creative research from niche conspiracies toward broadly accessible fiction, reaching audiences who might never have encountered the original lore. Children's drawings pinned to schoolroom walls in the series evoke lost innocence, mirroring the emotional ripples of stories tied to real places like Montauk. This transformation redirected public curiosity, steering it from actual Long Island sites to a made-up Midwestern town, while implicitly shaping views on Cold War-era psychic experiments. Popular adaptations like this can obscure real histories and the needs of actual people tied to those stories, prompting reflection on the responsibility creators hold when borrowing from communities that claim trauma. The Duffers' work, with its nostalgic glow, sends large cultural ripples, inviting viewers to imagine hidden worlds without claiming to reveal them. In the end, such entertainment repackages fringe material for mass audiences, amplifying themes through visuals like sodium vapor-lit streets and VHS-grained flashbacks, while echoing motifs of secret labs and youthful discovery. It reshapes public memory, turning local narratives into global phenomena.
Stories like these show how fringe ideas can evolve into something that captivates millions, but they also raise important questions about truth and impact. When mainstream entertainment borrows fringe motifs, does it illuminate truth, amplify harm, or both? As we draw this exploration of Camp Hero to a close, we've journeyed through layers of history and testimony that challenge what we accept as real. Now, let's reflect on how to hold these threads together with care.
The radom stands silent at dawn, wind whispering through scrub pines, casting long shadows over concrete bunkers. A single creak of a wooden chair echoes, followed by distant gull calls fading into quiet. Static crackles faintly, like a shortwave radio marking some unseen boundary. We've synthesized the verified history of a Cold War radar base, alongside documented CIA practices, contrasted with vivid first-person narratives from Montauk that remain uncorroborated. Archival gaps continue to hinder clear judgments, while the story's cultural reach has captivated audiences worldwide through books, films, and discussions. Central to this tale is Preston B. Nichols, whose accounts left a lasting imprint on popular imagination through his books and public appearances. Preston maintained public engagement with the story into his later life, resolute in his convictions and reflective on the experiences he described. He forced conversations about the line between personal testimony and verifiable proof, often defensive about his legacy when faced with skepticism. In doing so, Preston shaped how future storytellers approached similar fringe narratives, influencing a media ecosystem that draws from such sensational elements. Among the disputed claims are assertions that time travel portals and teleportation were created at Camp Hero, elements that echo broader tales like the Philadelphia experiment. That story first entered public circulation in 1956 and is widely considered a hoax. Navy logs and official statements contradict key claims about the USS Eldridge. Listeners are encouraged to hold multiple truths. MKUltra existed and caused real harm to people, yet no public records substantiate the most extraordinary Montauk claims. Human testimony, even when it cannot be corroborated, deserves humane treatment and compassion. For ethical storytelling, consider practical takeaways. Evaluate extraordinary claims by seeking primary sources. Question what would count as conclusive evidence, such as procurement records, personnel rosters, or authenticated artifacts necessary to prove or disprove the technical assertions tied to Camp Hero. An ethical rubric for journalists and storytellers involves balancing sensitivity to traumatic accounts with rigorous fact-checking. How we tell this story affects real people and shapes public understanding of institutional harm and myth. As the wind rises again around the radome, with that familiar chair creak, we leave the central question open, framed for more critical listening ahead.
In wrapping up, it's clear that compassion, truth, and accountability guide us through these shadowed histories. Thank you for joining us on Unexplained History. What does responsible closure look like when truth is partial, memories are powerful, and public appetite for mystery is enduring?